everyone, I'm Jennifer Zarate and you're watching CRNtv. Today I'm joined by a panel of cybersecurity experts to discuss the aftermath of Russia's alleged SolarWinds attack and its lasting impact. The attack last December utilized the SolarWinds Orion network monitoring platform as an entry point to compromise multiple federal agencies, as well as IT vendors Microsoft and FireEye. I'm now joined by CyberReason's Sam Curry, InfoSight's Peter Tran, and Resilient Advisors and retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral Michael Brown to dig into what all of this means for the channel and the IT industry at large. So as we look to learn from this supply chain attack, Peter, what are you telling your customers? Are they shaken up by the attack and fearful that they too are vulnerable?
That's a great question, Jenny. And I think that first and foremost, the customer base and what we refer to as the supply chain itself, they're worried. They're worried because this is not only yet another threat to the ecosystem with not only just the vendor supply chain and enterprises around the world, it poses an entire different challenge for them from a security standpoint. And not only just the technologies they use, but the types of skills they're going to need, and also the process and the protocols that they're going to need to put in place, especially since SolarWinds really is the underpinning, right, around keeping the supply chain together. So now there are doors open that are vulnerable that they wouldn't otherwise have known before. So that's a big concern, top of mind to this day.
And Mike, for solution providers trying to sell management tools or even managed services into government accounts, what kind of vetting or pushback should they expect to see going forward? I
think about two categories that solution providers need to be thinking about when dealing with the government. Number one is capabilities, and number two is what I would call must-haves. Let me talk about must-haves to begin with. First, you're going to see a lot more legislation and regulation. So the providers need to understand what the government is trying to achieve through that. You're going to be seeing a lot more of things like the cybersecurity maturity model certification process, where providers need to understand what controls and processes need to be in place in order to sell to the government. On the capability side, you're going to see, and actually you've already seen some of this, a call for more automation, a call for more modernization. And a lot of that's going to be built around what the government is calling zero trust architecture. And so I think that those two big categories are what the providers are going to have to be thinking about as they engage with the federal government.
So what types of best practices should solution providers be recommending to their clients, whether it's government agencies or business accounts, to protect against this kind of intrusion?
Well, I would emphasize what Mike said, that there's automation here and modernization that are absolutely essential. But to be clear, you could be doing everything right. And what this highlighted is that mistakes or even simple hacks with third parties and fourth parties could lead to you being a victim. In other words, simply doing hygiene isn't enough all by itself. Because remember, with SolarWinds, it was a signed, trusted update with a trusted provider. Let's just start from the assumption that they're going to get in that way somehow. So now what controls do you put in place after the fact? How do you look for the breakout behavior? Because if you look at how the attack actually happened, it landed and then it went very silent and waited. And it said, are the defenses here that could stop me? If so, suicide. I don't want to be affected. I don't want to be outed here. I don't want my campaign to be known. And then it slowly started to move sideways and laterally. It was the human behaviors, in other words, that led to compromise. It was the kill chains that started at that point. And you can do something about that.
Well, what I characterize what you just said was what enterprises tend to sit back and they get what's called enterprise amnesia, right? You see so many incidents and so many events, and you're handling them and you move on. You're handling and move on, and all of a sudden something like SolarWinds comes in, and they just said, you know, that looks familiar. I should have seen that, but I sort of forgot. And also to your point of this day and age, with mergers and acquisitions and a lot of companies coming together in partnerships, trusted partners, you don't want to acquire your next breach, right? So in the business sense, you say, we're doing another deal, this is exciting, but are we acquiring our next breach and we don't even know about it? And SolarWinds was that big red flag, which we're still unraveling, right, Sam? And I don't know.
Oh yeah, but the reason for automation is you got these premium people who are cyber people. You've got security folks. They should not be doing the mundane, repeatable tasks. They should be applying their special knowledge to finding the bad guys. And what Mike said was, hey, automate it, and automate the automatable. Get the routine out of the way. Make sure that, we often hear vendors and people sort of talk about intelligence and security, like AI is going to come online and solve this for you. And now AI is an important toolkit and machine learning, but in the end, there's intelligence and security. It's carbon-based. It's not silicon-based. It's people. And finding the way to have them applied the most efficiently you can means have them on the leading edge and automate what goes behind it. And to Peter's point, if you are acquiring a company, if you are bringing in a solution, if you are adopting a technology, you're kind of getting into bed with these people, right? Their problems become your problems. So it is a matter of how do you have secure and transparent security discussions across those corporate boundaries.
So what opportunities and risks did this attack bring to light for solution providers?
So let me start with what is, frankly, what the federal government has been trying to figure out for the last couple of years. And that's how to actually do DevSecOps. It's critically important that that security piece is part of the profile. As we all know, the ability to take advantage of automation, the ability to take advantage of the tools in the vendors' products out there relies on the agility and the flexibility that DevOps provides us. And so for security providers, being able to bring a suite of tools, being able to bring that to the process, again, going back to the automation, so that the people part can focus on this securely, I think that's going to bring a great advantage to the clients that are out there, in particular, the federal government. As I mentioned, especially in DoD and DHS, a heavy focus on how to do that. And so bringing some expertise to the table will help them achieve what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, as far as DevOps is concerned, because that's probably the one of the biggest blind spots in security. And in your time leading in the DHS and other agencies in the federal government during your times, I'm sure you saw the supply chain really being not just from anti-tamper initiatives, but when we're dealing with software development and other vendors such as Barracuda and White Source and Black Duck and others that are looking into the vulnerabilities within the development lifecycle of a lot of your software-driven environments that we all are in the midst of now. Not the scans aren't enough, right? It's to your point. It's built into the development lifecycle before releases as a seat at the table within engineering and the product release life cycle is doing that. And I think from InfoSight, for the perspective that we work with these companies in dealing with vulnerabilities within not just the process, but within the product teams themselves, they're starting to go down that road, especially when it comes to open source software and the vulnerabilities that come then you acquire your vulnerabilities because you're acquiring platforms that are great from a development and innovation standpoint, to Sam's point, but we have a lot of unanswered questions when you acquire those into your own development lifecycle.
Yeah, ironically, some open source stuff might have been harder to infiltrate. Some of it might have been more visible, and it's easier to apply some new controls and new technologies to that. But I would add only the notion of security debt. In technology, we've talked about tech debt for years. As you build something, you take shortcuts, and you build almost like building a credit card balance you're never paying down. Eventually, you have to start paying it down, but there's also security debt. The DevSecOps proposition is that you're going to start to pay some of that down, and you may start innovating there, and you'll start to find ways of maintaining a lower credit card balance in the bad security column, if you will. So I think there's an opportunity to innovate in at least 3 or 4 different areas here. And actually, I got asked, as I think all CISOs got asked and have asked, so were you SolarWinds customers, and were you affected? We all had the 3 or 4 question survey, but one of them asked a really interesting question. They said, what lessons did you have throughout? It wasn't it wasn't a, are you culpable? Are you a bad person? Did you do security wrong? It was, so what did you learn through this? And I would love to see what those responses were in aggregate from that vendor.
I think that's really important. And, going back to my time at DHS in following, we had a motto which was build security in. But Sam, just as you mentioned, it really wasn't followed, right? And part of the rationale was programmers, vendors, they really didn't know how to do it. And so that's what we've learned, right? Getting to the lessons learned, and we're definitely learning a lot from the SolarWinds attack, which is, it really is a long process that we have to have visibility into, and we need to be looking through the prism of security from the very beginning.